All right, for today, guys, we're going to be covering chapters 7 and 8. We're right on schedule, and obviously this will be the case for 7 and 8 are due next week. Today, the due date is for chapters 5 and 6. So hopefully that everybody's on track with that. Next week, then, will be our last discussion for SAGE, which would be chapters 9 and 10. And after that, basically, you can work on your project the following week. We'll have the whole class devoted to that. And that would make it the, what are we now? We're on the 2nd, the 9th, the 16th. We would have time available on the 16th and the 23rd to work on your project. I will also, on the 16th, talk about the PowerPoint project yet. And that's just a 5-minute kind of deal, just to show you what I'm looking for in that PowerPoint presentation at the end of the semester. And then I'll kind of wrap it up then. So, getting toward the end, so that's exciting. Today's discussion, we'll start with chapter 7. Probably the simplest chapter that we have, and it doesn't take long to do. But I just want to point out some things about chapter 7. Because it revolves around the financial reporting. Which would be the income statement and balance sheet with adjusting entries. And they're the simple adjusting entries. We're not doing a reversal entry or anything like that. And you can see here the 3 adjusting entries that we'll be covering in chapter 7 is office supplies used, the depreciation expense entry, and accrued salaries. And they give examples of all 3 in the book. The debit and the credit entries. We should be familiar with these also. These are the main ones that every month accountants do. So hopefully they'll make sense for everyone. Big thing here is to watch your transaction dates. Make sure you're in the correct period, right? And most often we make these adjusting entries at the end of the month. And also obviously the end of the year. I do want you to turn, if you have your book available, to page 285 in chapter 7. The figure is 7-7. The report that we're looking at is the General Journal report. And that report just shows our adjusting entries, right? That's the main focus of this report, is to show the adjusting entries. And looking at that figure, what is missing? What is missing on the General Journal report? What do I owe?
Add something, description.
Description, right? Yeah, the GL description. So whenever I ask for this report, not only in chapter 7, but also in your Net Solutions project, right? That account has to be there, the name of it. Because I have no idea what 301.5 is. I have no idea what 520 is. So it's very hard to read that report. Also, make sure to move next to account number. That description. That's what we're looking for here. And obviously what also, make sure I see the debit and the credit on one side of the page. I'm talking about the dollar amount. The report is really really hard to read if the debit's on one side and the credit is on the other. So be careful with that. Make sure that is there. Our next statement that the book talks about is the statement of changes in financial position. It begins on basically page 286. And if there is a section I'd like you to read, is to read page 286. Because it does a nice job discussing the various report types. The income statement, the statement of changes in financial position, what is working capital, the balance sheet, what is the statement of cash flows, what does it do, what's its purpose. Because again, those are some things that you as the accountant should know automatically, right? And in many cases, like we talked about, that discussion is with a non-accountant. Many times the person that's above you or you're reporting to is a non-accountant. So you want to make sure you may have a clear understanding of the different types of reports available in many software systems, not just Sage, whatever software system you're working with. So the statement of changes in financial position is explaining the differences on the balance sheet, the equity section basically. So if you could turn to page 290, if you have your book available. And what I want to look at is the net change, dollar amount. And the problem on this report is that it's not right. There's a difference in net change amounts. One number, it shows the net change at $18,037.96. And the other change is $17,887.96. In reality, it's off by $150. And what's missing on the report is a draw. There's a draw entry not entered here. Probably it might have an incorrect date on the draw entry. So that's what makes the report in error. If you slide over to the next page, page 290, look at accounts receivable and accounts payable. What's wrong with those two numbers? They're what?
They're different.
Yes, and that's very common, right? They can be different. Accounts receivable means what?
Receive.
From whom?
For the customer.
From the customer, right? Sales on account, right? And accounts payable is what? We owe our vendors because we bought it on account, right? What's the problem with those two numbers on that statement? What's the brackets mean?
Negative.
I can tell you this, those two numbers should never be negative. Never ever would that be a negative number. The only way that is possible is if we paid a vendor before we got the invoice, or a customer paid us before we did the service, or sold them something, or invoiced them. So what happens, I see this on student reports though, and what I inevitably find is it's a date issue. That the invoice is in a future period and the cash is in the current period, and that's how I get a negative balance. So my focus here is when you print off these reports, income statement, balance sheet, actually look for negative numbers. Make sure that is the case, and if it isn't, fix it, right? So just don't print it off and send it to me. Make sure that you look at those numbers closely. If a banker saw this, they would really question whether you know or understand accounting, just based on this one report. So be careful with it, please. What I have next after the printout of these statements is starting on page 293 all the way to page 301. They talk about a design of the financial statements, font size of the headings, moving some things around maybe. We are going to skip that discussion in chapter 7. It's not important. In most cases, you will never ever change the design of an income statement. And what they show you in this book is so limited anyway, it's really not worth our time. So you can certainly go through it. I'm not saying you don't have to, but obviously it's not what I'm going to be looking for. So chapter 7, a lot of the pages we can skip all the way to 301. And I do show that discussion also on 302. They actually have a checkpoint where you can do some modifications of the header on a balance sheet. Again, font size, that sort of thing. It's up to you if you wish to do that. So, that's basically it. Oh, I do want to mention on page 306, if you could turn there. Sage software, and I shouldn't say just Sage, but Sage specifically, they require that you close an accounting period. And you can close by month, right? And what this does is it gives the ability to restrict entry into a closed period. So if you're not the person actually entering in the transactions, you have somebody else doing it for you, you may want to close a period so that they can't make an entry in a closed month. And we talked about the importance of not making an entry in a closed month. Because once the period is closed, that means the financial statements are printed and no changes should be made, I should say should be made in a closed period. No changes should ever, especially when the period is the end of the year, right? Because again, tax returns have been filed based on those numbers as they were. So if we do find a problem in the future, our only choice is to do what? Adjusting entry with the current date. You can never make the adjusting entry into a closed period. So that's the key there. So, but anyway, this allows you to close a month, and it's very simple. You can just come up to our software. The option is under or over here on the right side. I can just say, well, that's changing accounting period.
What are you trying to do?
I'm trying to close the period.
And then change account period at the top.
I can't find it.
Nicole,
Where do you see that?
isn't that in your like report? Your trial?
Oh, system. That's, and then change accounting period.
Oh,
Well, that's just change. I want task, system, ending. That's still not it. That's the year end. I don't want the year end. I guess you can do it here too. If I go to 4, as for instance, press OK, you can do the closing, and then do you want to print reports? So this would allow you to print off the year end or month end that you're coming out of, print off all these reports for the month end. So, and that's all it is for change in the period. There's also, guys, I guess I didn't want to do that. Tasks. In other words, I'm going to have a lot of reports to delete. 24 pages there, 32 there. No. Tasks, system, year end actually closes the year. So there's actually 2 functions here, change accounting period and year end wizard. Year end, obviously, we would only do once a year, and that will close the year. And give you a new set. Remember, on this list, there's 24 open months. So we would get rid of 19, for instance, and add 21 for the year open, the open periods. So most clients that have Sage will wait till the second year before they actually run the close on, let's say, 19. All right. For the case then, it is Premier. So if we could turn to page 311. We have to make our adjusting entries for April 30th. So this is an April period. And the software will open up with that period open. 2017, what I want to mention is the first one. So take a look at letter, well, I guess there is no letter, the office supplies on hand. Take a look at that adjusting. This is probably the one that gives students the most trouble. Can I ask, where is the $180 located? What statement?
It's going to be in the office supply on hand, the balance here.
Balance sheet, right? So my request is that when you make this adjusting entry, that you look at the balance sheet and make sure it shows $180. Okay? That's the number we want to get to. Does that make sense? That's what should show there. So often students, I'll see this number on the balance sheet. I'll know exactly what they did.
They use that number.
They use the 180 as the adjustment, and that's not the adjustment amount. So look for that number when you're done. Make sure it's on the balance sheet when you're done. The other 2 are pretty straightforward. What I do require as PDF reports, then the general journal, I do make a note that the account description has to be added to the report. Make sure that they both, well, the one will automatically fit on one page. Also, make sure that report fits on one page. If I go to the software under reports, what section is the trial balance and general journal reports on? General ledger, yep. Okay. And make sure again that we're picking the general journal, know what it's on it. And it was the trial balance, right? Or was it the ledger?
Trial.
Trial balance. Okay. So those are the two that I'm looking for. You can certainly look at the others, the ledger, the transaction detail report, just display them on your own, or working trial balance. This is the one that we do before entries. Remember doing this in accounting too?
Mm-hmm.
That's the one we can show the actual debit credit adjustment on it, and then it shows an ending balance. So take a look at those others if you get a chance. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to stop the recording then.